Good evening. Nice to have all of you on the same time zone. And this is something we look forward to. We're going to go through this Zoom call, and over many studies, we have found it helpful for participants to have a little deeper chance to know organizations, what we're doing, why, getting questions, and also realize that thank you all who have been able to join this evening, but also recognize that some of you will be joining later. So whether it's now or later, great to have you on. And the question and answers that we're talking about are ones that we will post on the website for both the answers to the questions and additional questions. So feel as if this is something that's both live and possible to connect with afterwards. So what are we going to do today? I'll start out and tell you something about Buck Phenome Health for you and me, and why we're doing the study. I help lead the group at For You and Me, and I'm the PI on this study. After I do that, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer, who is going to give you a drill down on some of the science on why we're doing the modeling and what we're doing in the clinic. She'll pass it over then to Christiana, who will talk about progress on enrollment and the connections that I think each of you have made, certainly more deeply with her than any of us, on why we do the engagements. Then we'll go over to then the in-clinic efforts from Allison, who you have met if you've already had one of your OGTT at the Buck, over to Robin, over to Emma, and then we'll try to have enough time to get into some fun open discussions of all the studies that we've done. I think we have noted that the depth of knowledge about the disease, the depth of knowledge about why things are done and things like that is, I think, as peaked as we've ever had. So we're sort of excited about those questions at the end. So those three study partners For You and Me, Phenome Health and Buck, are luckily funded by ARPA-H. Why Phenome Health? Pretty straightforward. Phenome Health has been working on areas of how to identify aspects of disease, quantify health, increasing health span. The person who's driven it there at Phenome Health is Lee Hood. I've known Lee since we founded a startup back in the 90s, and I think it is worth your knowing how deeply he has driven the field of understanding disease through genomics. He was the developer of the first automated DNA sequencer. He figured out this term people now use, 4P, for predictive, preventive, personalized, participatory medicine. And he is at Phenome Health, where you'll hear from Jennifer. But he's also at the Buck, and at the Buck, the emphasis there is on looking, when it says multiple avenues of inquiry, it's like super multi-dimensional data. So it's analyte data, it's healthcare data, et cetera. And their new direction has been to be more focused on humans, more focused on clinical studies. And this is the role that they're playing in this study. And as for You and Me, for You and Me is a nonprofit. We've been working since I left Apple on how we could use smartphone apps and wearables to empower individuals. So instead of trying to extend the office of a clinician, really what we've been trying to figure out is what could be done by individuals who want to self-navigate their own health. We feel as if much of the data that's in the literature is aggregate data, and we're trying to explore how it is that individuals can have data that really pertains to them, not just to that aggregate, and have been running a number of studies to build portraits of how individual symptoms can be followed on these wearable devices. There's a bunch of publications. We'll make this presentation available, and these are links out to work that we're doing. For tonight, Jennifer, I thought it was helpful to highlight there was a series last couple of years in the New England Journal that we did on wearables, and Mike Hughes, it's listed here in this article that you may have seen in NEJM, is on digital technologies for diabetes. He's become one of our key consultants, and also some of the aspects of how wearables are used are in some of those. So, what is beta? What is our objective? Well, the goal here in this study is to see if it's possible to get information about pancreatic beta cell function, not by the traditional means, which are invasive, as you know. Wherever you do an oral glucose tolerance test, OGTT, it involves going to a clinic, significant prep, following various analytes in real time. We're trying to see if we could figure out a way where wearable devices, not having to go to the clinic, could give that information. So that is what we mean by non-invasive approach. And to do that, we are collecting data from the CGMs, from various wearables, and an app that allows us to follow context and match it to what it is that is able to be collected within the clinic. We are starting this study that has two parts. First part is on type 1 diabetics. And this feasibility study is done because we are able to look at insulin responses, match it with at-home challenges, and think that will allow us to get information, obviously, that is of value to those with type 1 diabetes and may also inform the work that we're wanting to extend to later, which is the type 2 diabetics and pre-diabetics. So as you will see or hear from Jennifer, is a process and a pipeline to allow some computation in minimal models. And we have done the following to get us there. This design points out the fact that there is a whole set of data that we can get from the in-clinic OGTTs. We also realize that that oral glucose tolerance test is not one that we want to necessarily exactly mimic at home. And so the ability to have a mixed meal tolerance test and do that in the clinic, get the C-peptides, get the insulin measures, and tie this to this, then allows us to come over to this and begin to follow at home during the times when there are meal challenges at home, get parameters from these mixed meal tolerance tests, plus or minus things that are cognitive stress tests. And also during that entire interval when there isn't going to the clinic, there isn't a meal challenge test, some of the most important data is actually what's happening when one is having one's CGM on and tracking various things on the glucose excursions in terms of what is related to that or not. So the theme is, can we collect data at home that makes up for the lack of the insulin for the C-peptide data that will still allow us to calculate the parameters of minimal model? And that is why, in addition to the in-clinic tests, we have these at-home meal tests. We have the meal tests with stress. We have the app data that we're collecting not when those meal tests are going on. And these tools that we have, such as we've noticed, insights from the engagement calls that you have with Christiana. So two quick slides on sort of how that works. One of our other key consultants is Pete Jacobs at Oregon Health Sciences, and the machine learning models that he has worked on in terms of looking at how you could follow individuals with type 1 diabetes and ask questions like, can we predict who is going to become hypoglycemic during exercise or not, rest on using these mixed effects, logistic regressions, mixed random forests, and the concept of collecting the clinical data, glucose data, insulin data, and physical activity. You can see in some ways is a sort of precursor to what we're all collecting, the concept of using that data to come up with some models to get some AUC, ROC curves that allow you to say, here is a key factor that drives hypoglycemia. And those tools that he built to do that are the tools we're going to use, along with a way of using digital twins, which allow us to collect information from others and establish parameters in ways that I can go back to if this is of interest to anybody else than us later. So The way that we have operated for the last 7, 8 years is to do feasibility studies. In our mind, this beta study is a feasibility study asking, are we able to collect the right data? Are we able to synthesize through to the parameters that we need to develop this non-invasive test? So the reason I wanted to show you this is this is the nature of what we do is try to run studies where the participants are giving us information, but actually, as important, we're hoping that these are studies where you're learning, where you're involved, where your input and actually shaping things are super important to us. So it's sort of more of a partnership than there's this researcher and you're expected to do this. It's much more of a symmetrical relation that we like to have in these studies. And if you just want to know what's going on that comes up on your app, we have this cluster of assessment tests, assessments, some daily, some more, less frequently, sometimes only once, passive assessments. And these are those streams of data that we use to be able to go, I wonder if we could model this by something other than having to have someone do a particular meal challenge test. This should look familiar. This is the use of the app. So the app with the wearable data, the biweekly dialogues with the coordinators. This is what we're hoping will come together to give us a sense of where what's happening to you and how we can assess what we're trying to. So with that, I'm going to shift over to Jennifer, if you will be kind enough to introduce yourself, I'll flip over to the next slide.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Lovejoy. I'm the co-investigator from Phenome Health on this study, and I have a background in clinical and translational science and diabetes research. So I'm really excited to be doing this study with Stephen and the Buck and the team at For You and Me. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about is our oral glucose tolerance tests, the OGTTs. What are we doing with them? Some of you have said, why are you doing OGTTs in people with type 1 diabetes? So I thought I would explain that a little bit. It's a bit sciencey, but bear with me because I think it'll show you why this actually makes sense. So if you could go to the next slide, Stephen. All right. So we're using, and you might have seen this in one of Stephen's earlier slides, something called the minimal model method. It's a mathematical model. Don't worry about it. But what it does is it allows us to use the samples which we are collecting, at more frequent intervals, as you've probably noticed if you've already done your OGTT at the Buck, and also continuing the test out for 3 hours instead of the typical clinical 2 hours. And most importantly, we're measuring insulin and C-peptide as well as glucose at every point. And so by doing that, we can calculate not only your insulin secretion or beta cell function, but your insulin sensitivity. That is basically how effectively the cells in your muscles and your fat tissue and other parts of your body will take up glucose because of insulin, how effectively glucose itself moves without insulin into your blood. And I know for some of you, that is a pretty significant factor. And then other things, which, and most importantly, this last one on the bulleted list on the right, the disposition index, which is what is shown in the graph on the right. And the idea here is that there is a relationship, a curved relationship between your beta cell function, your insulin secretion, and your insulin sensitivity. So when people don't have diabetes, they are, kind of on that solid line curve. They're producing enough insulin to balance out whatever degree of insulin, decreased or increased insulin sensitivity they have, and they're in balance. With type 2 diabetes, when people start to get more insulin resistant, the beta cell function increases, and at some point it'll stop and people kind of fall off to where that dashed line is shown. And that's when diabetes will develop in people with type 2. In people with type 1, of course, what happens is the beta cell function actually declines. And there, even if your insulin sensitivity is normal or good, you're not producing enough insulin to balance it out. And again, the result is high blood sugar. So this relationship, this disposition index, has proven to be a very key feature in understanding and predicting the development of diabetes. And so when we do those mathematical models that Stephen was showing in those graphs a couple slides ago, this is what we're actually trying to model to see if we can use the at-home test, the non-invasive tests, to model disposition index in a way that will kind of tell us how people are doing in the trajectory and progression of diabetes. Now, the other thing I want to call attention to, and Stephen briefly mentioned this, and you might have been scratching your heads going, what? So, coming soon, we are going to we're going to kind of update the protocol for the study, and you'll all be hearing about this. So, instead of coming into the buck and doing a second oral glucose tolerance test, we're going to have you come into the buck and do a meal tolerance test exactly like what you're doing at home, except this time with the more frequent blood draws, with the insulin, with the C-peptide, so that we can do the minimal modeling on that and have a direct comparison to your home test. And so really both the oral glucose tolerance test and this in-clinic meal tolerance test that you'll be hearing about in the coming weeks are going to be really important for us to better interpret and understand what's happening from your home data, which is really what we're going to try to model. So that is why we're doing these in-clinic challenges. And I wanted to show you on the next slide a little bit of the data that we are getting back, because I think you'll find it pretty interesting. So here I'm showing on the top part is glucose, the middle graph is insulin, and the bottom graph is C-peptide. And this is kind of what we would expect, and probably what you expect. We've told you to just have basal insulin on board. If you have your pump, you're in manual mode, you're not getting your bolus injections. And so, of course, your glucose does go pretty high. And we are seeing pretty typically people going up to 300 to 400 and then starting to come down, usually after the second hour of the test. And again, in those bottom two curves, not much insulin production. So we're seeing pretty flat lines there. Because of the scale of this, you can barely see them, but there is a little bit of insulin because we know that your pump is working or you've given yourself your injection. But
And Jennifer, just one
interestingly,
quick thing,
yeah.
and this is a specific, or it's a anonymized, but this isn't actual. This isn't hypothetical. This is someone's real data. Just keep going. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so now I'd like to show you someone else's real data from the study. And this is a person who, when we did this test, we found had residual beta cell function. We know this happens. You undoubtedly know it happens, but we've seen this in the, I don't know, 10 or so oral glucose tolerance tests that we've done so far. 3 people have had this. So you'll see at the top, again, a slightly lower curve of glucose because there is some insulin being produced by the pancreas there in the middle with the red line, the insulin, and the C-peptide, which is just another marker of what's coming from the pancreas. So this is pretty exciting because it shows us that we're going to be able to see differences across different participants, from those who truly are just at a basal flat level of insulin and some who are responding. We do all of those minimal model parameters. We know some people are going to have really great insulin sensitivity, others may be a little more insulin resistant. And so we're seeing the diversity here that's really going to allow us to make sense of our modeling and interpret the at-home data in a better way. So that's what I've got. So I'll turn it back over to Christiana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christiana here, which you all know, as I've had the pleasure of connecting with all of you. I'm a senior clinical research coordinator here at For You and Me. And tonight I'm just going to share a few updates about recruitment and enrollment, and then just discuss some key points about the check-in calls. Stephen, if you can go to the next slide. I think my slides might be a little bit
Did you want to go to this one?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we had 135 people complete our pre-screening form, which you guys are all familiar with. 52% of those participants came from unknown sources, but the majority of those includes those participants that we did not have screening calls with, so we didn't get that information. Our leading recruitment method was actually Instagram with 25%, which actually accounted for more than our other two outreach methods. So from T1D advocate outreach at 13% and word of mouth at 4%. So Instagram was pretty successful for us, which was very cool. Next slide, Stephen. And then so for enrollment, we completed 63 screening phone calls. Of those calls completed, 30% were ineligible. And of course, 70% met our criteria. Of that 70%, 48% enrolled in the study and 22 didn't. And that 48% brought us to our 30 enrolled participants. Alrighty, so now just to touch a bit on the biweekly check-in calls and your feedback. So as you all know, we've been touching base twice a month rather, to just make sure everything is working with your study devices, follow up on any issues with the app, and of course, answer any questions. But aside from all of that logistical stuff, the check-in calls are a very important part of the feedback loop that helps us kind of characterize some of that quantitative data, as Stephen was kind of getting into a little earlier. So first, the wearable device data and the My Compass feature that's in your study app kind of allows for you guys to be drivers and really explore what factors may impact or trigger significant changes in your blood glucose levels, or as we call them, glucose excursions. Then the check-in calls that we have twice a month really provide a space for us to kind of discuss those personal explorations or insights that you might have to your glucose excursions, because you go through them and you know them the best. So for example, one participant I can think of just noted some repeated overnight lows and suspected this might have been the result of the timing of their physical activity. So they have been actively adjusting the timing of that activity just to, potentially help alleviate some of those lows. So that's just one example of some helpful context that's been provided, and really helps us kind of, as I mentioned, characterize some of those excursions. So we just want to encourage you to, unpack those personal insights on the calls that you have with me, particularly related to the factors of like diet, stress, activity, and sleep. As I noted, those insights that come from you guys as participants really allow us to kind of add context and to our objective data, and also plays a key role in making like a more robust data picture overall. So thank you so much for your self-explorations and insights, and of course, making the time for the check-in calls twice a month. And I will hand it back over.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison. I work with the Buck, and I'm here to talk to you guys about you coming in for the oral glucose tolerance test. So I will help coordinate that in person when you come in for your in-person visits. So how it happens is Christiana gives me the green light when we are ready to schedule your visit. I reach out, I ask some questions, and we find a time for you to come see us. If you can bring it next slide, Stephen. We're located in Novato, California. We're about 30 minutes north of San Francisco. If you ever drive on the 101, you've probably seen us. It's kind of hard to miss. We're on top of the hill there. But with that said, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you who will be coming to visit us soon. I want to walk you through the process, show you some faces that you'll be seeing when you come here, and answer any questions that you guys may have. So next slide, Stephen. First, I want to introduce our leadership team. So we have Dr. John Newman, then we have Dr. Brianna Stubbs and Dr. Thelma Garcia that lead the team. On the operations side, we have Chatora, and myself working kind of in the background. And on the medical staff side, we have our full-time nurse, Natalie Hoffman, who most of you will probably see when you come in. And then we have a backup nurse, Deborah Kruger. And then we also have a backup physician, Dr. Susan Gross, as well. The clinical research associates will be the ones that kind of coordinate most of the visits that when you're here. And so we have 5 of them working on the project. We have Elizabeth Stevens, Kat Ellen, Prabin Garti, Sophia Lee, and Eduardo Hernandez. They will be the ones that will greet you at the door when you come in. Natalie or Deb will be the ones that will put in IV for you when you come here, so that we can take the blood samples from you throughout the procedure, so we're not stabbing you throughout for that. And so on behalf of everyone here at the Buck, I just want to take a moment to also thank everyone who's already come in to complete their OGTT with us. We definitely appreciate your time and your commitment. Your participation is what makes this trial possible, and it means a lot to us working behind the scenes to ensure that everything runs smoothly. The last thing I want to leave everybody with is just some helpful reminders that we've encountered. About a third of the participants have already come in for their OGTTs. So we thank you for that. And we want to just remind people to follow any fasting instructions that we give you. We also will, if you haven't come in yet, we will email you these instructions. You don't have to, take notes or anything right now. We'll discuss it over the phone and we'll also email you instructions. But please follow any fasting instructions you receive before you come in. It really helps us to get, accurate results. We also ask that you eat about 150 grams of carbs each day for about 3 days before you come in, and that's also really important because for participants who generally eat a lower carb diet, we don't want to shock your body when you're doing the test. So it's really important that you eat 150 carbs per day before that. We also ask that you change your CGMs about 2 days before you come, just to prevent any data disruptions. If you're putting on a CGM right before you come in, or maybe it's at the end of the life of a CGM, we might have some data disruptions there. The test is pretty long. It's about 3 to 4 hours long when you're here. So we just want to remind everybody to wear some comfortable clothes. Also, something that's important that we were saying too is if your glucose is above 200 the day of your visit, please reach out to us and we'll have to reschedule your visit. The last thing that we want to leave you with is also to bring in your insulin. We've had our participants pump fallout on the way to us. So we just want to make sure that, we have everything that you need when you come in. So that's really important in case of for any reason to bring in your insulin.
Great, thank you, Alice. I'm gonna move it over to Robin.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Robin, and I'm a senior data scientist at 4U&Me. It's my job to take all the data that you're so generously contributing and turn it into some meaningful insights about health and behavior. Stephen, yeah, perfect. So we're collecting an incredible variety of information. As Stephen has showed earlier, that includes your data from your continuous glucose monitors, heart rate and stress signals from the Empatica watch. We also get sleep and recovery patterns from the Oura Ring, and also your daily surveys in the app that capture how you're feeling and what you're experiencing. So altogether so far, it's already grown into a pretty massive multi-dimensional data set there's already nearly 2 million individual data points collected so far, and that number continues to grow every single day. For those of you that have chosen to share your data, we'll make all of it eventually available, not only to you, but also to researchers worldwide. And then, yeah, today I'll just give you, you can go to the next slide, Stephen. Today I'll just give you a quick sneak peek into some of the early insights, and we'll look at how glucose and stress responses appear across several different contexts in the study. So first up here is going to be the challenge tests that many of you have completed at home already. Here we're comparing a non-stress challenge on the left to a stress challenge on the right for the same participant. With the blue line at the top, you'll see the glucose levels. Next in green are the electrodermal activity, or EDA, which reflects your physiological stress. And below that is going to be the respiration rate and the heart rate, all from the Empatica watch. So here you'll see in the non-stress challenge that glucose does gradually rise while EDA does stay mostly flat. And there's some minor changes in both the respiration and pulse rates there. In the stress challenge on the right, you'll see that for this participant, the glucose starts a bit lower but climbs a bit more rapidly. And we also see some light increases in their breathing and heart rate as well. Interestingly, for this participant, they didn't show much EDA change during the stress test, but there is a delayed spike around 2 hours later, which could reflect some lingering stress recovery. But that's something we're looking into as we get more of these done. You can go to the next slide, Stephen. Next, this is going to be looking at the effects of food. So we're going to be comparing glucose responses for snacks on the left and meals on the right across several meals for several participants. At first glance, you'll see that there's a lot of individual variation here, but there are a few general patterns that stand out. For example, snacks on the left look like they tend to produce smaller and slower glucose increases that happen, around 1 to 2 hours, peaking around 1 to 2 hours after the meal. While meals, on the other hand, on the right, tend to show, quicker and higher glucose spikes shortly after eating. And, as we continue to collect more of this detailed food diary data, we'll be able to connect these responses to specific foods, portion sizes, and timings that'll give us a clear picture of how each person's metabolism reacts. And then finally, here's a 24-hour view of average glucose and EDA patterns across the whole study. And so this is going to be a snapshot of metabolic and emotional balance throughout the day. Glucose, once again in blue, is going to follow the pattern that we sort of expect, with a dip early in the morning, then rises during the day and evening that corresponds with meals and activity. And the EDA in red shows, a really interesting inverse relationship overnight that drops during resting, and then it mirrors glucose more closely throughout the day. So this sort of suggests that, glucose levels and stress levels, might be linked during the waking hours and is possibly connected to sleep quality as well. And so this is one of the areas that, we're especially excited to keep watching as more data accumulates. And I think, yeah, that's all the visualizations I have to show today. But again, it's just the beginning, and we'll keep exploring these relationships as we get more participants and more data. And I wanted to thank you guys all again for sharing your data and making this research possible.
Thanks, Robin. Stephen, do you want to go to the next slide?
Do you want to? There are some people who don't know your role here.
Yeah, I will introduce myself.
Okay.
So I am Emma. I am the clinical research manager here at For You and Me. I've interacted with a couple of you for your at-home challenges, but I do work really closely with Christiana behind the scenes, so I feel like I know most of you. I did want to quickly shout out the other member of our participant-facing team here at For You and Me, who is also on the call, Maddie, who I know many more of you who have interacted with for your at-home challenges. So what I wanted to go through today is a quick rundown of the 3 aspects of participation outside of the 2 in-person buck visits and the at-home challenges. And these are the study app, your wearable devices, and your check-in calls. So starting with the study app, there has been a big update in the past 24 hours. I know many of us have our automatic app updates on, so you may not have even noticed this, but it wouldn't hurt to go to your app store and just check that you're running the most recent version of the app, which is this is in the iOS App Store, which is version 1.0.3. For our handful of Android participants, you have not been forgotten. Your update is coming soon, hopefully in the coming week or so, and Christiana will let you know when that happens. So in addition to that update that just occurred in the last 24 hours, I do want to make a note that with that update came a pretty big change in the visualization in the app. So for the next 24 hours, your My Compass chart might look a little bit wonky, but after that point, you should see these updates and see the improvements in the visualization. If anything that I say on this slide doesn't match up with your personal experience, let Christiana know and we can work through any issues that you're having. So I want to touch on the 4 features in the app. So these are the features that are not the surveys or the quick activities. So I know many of you have already been using the I have noticed feature. Some of you have been using the I've eaten feature, and I think a couple of you have been using the My Doses feature. So with all of these features, we are aware that there is an issue with time zones. So we want to assure you that as you are entering or using any of these features and entering your notes or what you've eaten that day or your insulin doses that day, that as long as you are putting the correct time and date on your end, that is the time and date that we will have in our data set. What you will see visually in the app right now does not match that. You'll see a time and a date and time that is about 7 hours off. We know that, and that is actually something we're very actively working on, and we hope to have that fixed in the coming week or so. For the I've eaten feature,
I did want to touch on that. So I know that many of you have expressed to Christiana that like this is something that you're already tracking in a different place, and that may be a reason why you haven't been using this feature as much. With this app update, your I've eaten entries will now appear on your My Compass chart. So we hope having that visualization will like make the feature more useful for you. But I also did want to point out that if you are recording your like food and snacks in a different place and you don't want to record it in two places every single day, you are able to enter this data in retroactively. So if you're entering it in a different place every single day and you don't want to use our app to do that, you can just pick one day a week where you go into our app and enter that data. You'll have the option every time you enter a food or a snack to select the correct date and time. And then we have the My Doses feature. This is a feature that is only applicable to our participants who do not have a pump, which I know is only a handful of you. But this feature has now also been updated, so you should see it represented in a meaningful way on your My Compass chart. This is another aspect of your habits that you have mentioned to Christiana that you might already be recording in a different place. If that is the case, if every single day you already have a different place where you're putting this information, this is also a feature where you can enter that data in retroactively. You can certainly use this to enter it in the moment, of course, but I just wanted to make note of that because I know many of our participants have expressed that it's hard for them to do that in two places every single time one of these things happens. And so we hope that the improvements in the My Compass chart representing these different entries will, improve your experience using them. And then we have the We Have Noticed feature. This is a feature that is intended to automatically recognize your glucose excursions and alert you and trigger a prompt that would allow you to provide some context in the app. I know a couple of you have started to get We Have Noticed prompts pop up, but you had a couple issues with them, and I know you've reported those to Christiana. Some of you have not seen a We Have Noticed prompt at all. Of course, that does not mean that you have not had any glucose excursions. This is a feature that we are currently fine-tuning, and we are working on very actively, and we expect that that feature will be working as it should in the coming months. But we do expect more and more participants to start seeing those We Have Noticed pop-ups, alerts, and prompts to provide some context around your glucose excursions. So in the most recent app update, again, these are the features that have been updated, and we hope that you try to use them with regularity as much as possible. And with all of these features, it has been extremely useful for you to provide feedback to Christiana. We are using that feedback and taking in that feedback, any issues you're having, any comments about these features, how we can make them more useful for you. We're taking that all in, and we will use it to, better our app and the study experience. So it's very important, and we really appreciate that feedback from you guys. Now I want to go into the wearable devices. So starting with the Oura Ring. I know the Oura Ring is a really usable device, and most of our participants have a really good experience wearing it and have no issue wearing it with regularity. We do know that right now many of our participants are having an issue syncing their Oura Ring with the study app. That is actually something that again is actively being worked on, but should be fixed in the coming days. Christiana will alert you as soon as it's time to try to sync again. But I did want to make note that as you're wearing your Oura Ring, as long as you can see your Oura data in your Oura app, you should continue to wear your Oura Ring as often as you can. We will be able to pull that data retroactively as soon as we are able to resync your device with the study app. But I do know the Oura Ring adherence has been very high, and we really appreciate that. And we encourage you to continue to wear your Oura Ring as often as possible. But I just wanted to reassure you that we will be able to access that data, and it is still really important for you to try to wear your Oura Ring, although you can see that it's not syncing with the study app directly yet. And then I want to touch on our other wearable device, which is the Empatica Embrace Plus wristband. I do see that a comment, maybe more since I last looked, has already come in about the Empatica. So for those of you who are wearing your Empatica without any issues and are having no problem wearing it, that is wonderful, and we encourage you to continue that. But we are aware that this is not the most usable or user-friendly device, and we do know that many of our participants are expressing various frustrations with wearing the Empatica, and we completely understand those, and we are totally aware of those. This is not to say that your continued feedback is not useful. As with all of these things, as much feedback as you want to give, we will take. But with the Empatica, we do ask, and all of you who have had an at-home challenge or your buck visit know that we do ask that you try to wear your Oura Ring and your Empatica during your in-person visits and your at-home challenge. We ask that you try to wear your Empatica in the day or two leading up to each of those events, and if possible, a day or two after each of those events. Other than that, if you're someone who's not really struggling with wearing your Empatica on a regular basis, again, we understand that. And what we would ask from you is that you pick 1 week during your study period, and it can be any week that is convenient for you. You can let Christiana know, what week it is so we can make sure we see your data coming in that week. But you can choose 1 week during your study period and choose that week to wear your Empatica each day of that week. And then if you do that, you can, kind of decide not to wear your Empatica regularly outside of the at-home challenges and in-person visits. So, we do know that some of you are struggling with that. And of course, we understand, and we are sorry that it's not the most user-friendly device. But again, this feedback is really important, and we do want to work with you and make this, as usable as possible. And then finally, I did want to touch on your biweekly check-in calls with Christiana, which I know she already went into detail about, so I'll just be brief. I mentioned that this We Have Noticed feature is kind of in the works, kind of up and coming, and should be rolling out in the next month or so. For some of the participants, they've already started to see it. As this feature is being rolled out, if you guys are not seeing a We Have Noticed alert, Christiana is not either. So, ideally, she would be using those alerts to prompt you about specific times to get some context around your glucose excursions. But as that feature is, not yet working as it should, what would be really useful during those check-in calls, and why those check-in calls are so important, is these calls are the place that we will get that context. So what we would ask of you is that you make note personally, and I'm sure all of you, most of you are already doing this, but that you make note of, any kind of major fluctuations in your glucose levels, in the weeks leading up to your call, and make some notes about the context around that. And on those calls, you can discuss those excursions with Christiana. In this case, you would actually be the one alerting her to these, fluctuations, as she will not see the alerts. But if you alert her to a fluctuation at a certain time, she will be able to look back and see it. So it would just be really useful to have you guys start, be able to self-identify some important moments in your past couple weeks, and just give Christiana as much context around that time point as possible. And yeah, I think that is those are the main things that I wanted to go through.
Super. As I go into the questions, I just want to emphasize two things that Emma said well. One was, I think, extending what Emma said, insights that you have where you have noticed, hey, if I do this exercise or if I do that, and purposely do your own querying and think those insights that are there that you have, we think may be more mature and of deeper value than trying to extract what is going on. So I want to congratulate those who are using this as a vehicle to make their insights, and also for those who aren't too bothered by the Empatica data. If the Empatica data drops off so everyone stops doing it but just 1 week, we probably won't have enough data. So if there are people who are not being as frustrated, you can keep using your Empatica devices. Every week of data on that may be helpful. And certainly those who are showing the frustration and issues that Emma said, I hope this gives you a little bit of relief. So with that, let's go over to this. I think we have 10 or a little more minutes left. Emma, if we can, again, have all the questions that come up will get answered, but can you help us go to ones that actually have some sort of element of query that may be enjoyable to tackle while we're on live, as opposed to doing it where they'll be all published later?
Yeah, sure. And I know that our participants can't see the other questions that are being
Yeah.
asked.
And just one quick, and Diane, can you pull us all up now for the so that they can see us when we do the
Absolutely.
yes.
So just a reminder that this call will be recorded. All of you will have access to the recording. But in addition to that, any questions that we don't get to, we will write out the answers for you. So we will send out the answers to all of these questions if we can't, I mean, if we get to them or not, we will send out the answers to all of these questions. So first we have a participant who asked, speaking of individual variability, given how very different T1D folks respond to food and activity, how is the study team accounting for these individual differences when analyzing beta cell function trends?
Let me start, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. The really cool thing is, again, going into this call, we knew that you thought deeply. And the interesting thing here is that those individual differences, whether it is aspects of body weight or are exactly what we're trying to find. And so those differences, instead of them being something that will be a bother, I think we hopefully can use in ways that give us a sense of how to do the modeling instead of twisting us. And Jennifer, do you want to put a turn on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's kind of exactly why we're doing this, and that's also why it's so important for you to give us, your feedback, your thoughts, your I've noticed, like Emma was talking about, and we don't want to overstate how easy this is going to be either. I think, Robin showed that graph of the snacks and meals that kind of look like a giant hairball with all of the different individual responses that people have to snacks and meals. But that is exactly what we want to use some of these machine learning methods to be able to see if we can deconvolute those individual differences and make some sense out of them in combination with what we're hearing from you of, oh, this was the composition of what I ate. This was a big meal or a small meal, or I had just gone running, or whatever it is. When we have all that data and can put it together using these large computational models, we hope to be able to make some sense of it.
Thank you, Stephen and Jennifer. So I think the next question we've kind of already gone through, but I don't want to, skip over it because I know that this is an important issue. So we did have a participant express his frustration or their frustration with the Empatica using a lot of battery on their phone. This is an issue we are very aware of and we empathize with. It sounds like for you specifically and for anyone who is experiencing this to the point that you have to carry around a extra battery with you, the guidelines I gave for Empatica use in the previous slide would apply to you. We obviously do not want to make your life like more inconvenient or cause these kind of issues where you're missing things that you need to be doing. If it is this much of a drain on your battery and it's really affecting your everyday life, we completely understand you not wearing it every day. If this particular participant who mentioned this issue, if you could just reach out to Christiana and let her know. We are making specific note of empatica issues that do come up. So if you haven't already, please let Christiana know so we can make note of it.
And we know
Emma,
that your battery is trying to handle other things and is putting a load on it already. The other quick thing is older phones sometimes have less battery, but that doesn't really help if that's what you have. But generally, it varies by person depending upon that and all the things that you're tracking. Back to you, Emma.
I was just noticing, Emma, there's another question about empatica while we're talking about empatica. Maybe
Yeah.
we could jump down to
Sure.
that because I think it kind of relates. Like, why is the
Yeah.
empatica important and why is it getting different data? So maybe if
Yep.
you want to clarify that.
So yeah, this question is, why are we using the empatica and not the Garmin or Apple Watch?
Okay.
And Stephen,
Let
do
me
you
take,
want to? Yeah.
yeah, this is a good question, and we probably should have put it in earlier. So there are various ways to look at what is happening in your body from your parasympathetic and sympathetic system. There are ways that you can get some sense of what's going on, and these are loads that are going on your pancreas or not. So that's why it's normally interested, or on your muscles and liver. And the electrodermal activity is the primary reason that we're using the device from Empatica. They have done more work with the FDA, with other groups to have it be solid data. So they have the sort of one of the deepest records of getting sort of truth values for the electrodermal activity. Apple Watch doesn't have electrodermal activity, so we can't use that. There are other devices you may know about. Fitbit Gen 2 Sense has electrodermal activity that we're looking into potentially using for the next part of the study. But it's the electrodermal activity that tells us more what's going on in terms of stresses on different organs by measuring electrodermal activity that you can't get an aura, you can't get from Apple, or we would just say, why don't we just use those other devices?
Thanks, Stephen. And then there are two questions that mention the Omnipod 5, which maybe Jennifer will be able to take. So the first is, do you think this data could help improve the algorithm that controls my pump? In this case, this participant has the Omnipod 5. And then we have another question that is, are you getting our Omnipod 5 data for dosing information?
Yeah, I saw those. So, in terms of improving the algorithm, I think this specific study is not going to address that. Although the kinds of methods that we're using to, sort of like that digital twin that Stephen showed, that was able to detect factors that would increase risk of hypoglycemia during exercise, that is the kind of thing that will ultimately help improve things like algorithms for pumps. But we do need to get your Omnipod data, and I mentioned we're going to be sending out soon a new version of the protocol, the consent form that you signed to update it with the in-clinic meal tolerance test. What you will also see in that new version is that we are going to ask your permission to access third-party data sources. Now, for Omnipod, I think that is it's something called Gluco, and we can access that. If you have a Tandem pump, we're going to get that through something called Tidepool if you give us permission to do that. So that was something we had not considered in our initial consent and realized very much that we absolutely need it. So we will be requesting that you be, if you're willing to share that data with us, it'll be extremely helpful for both the Omnipod and Tandem devices. So more to come on that.
Yeah, Jennifer, perfect. But just can you do like one last sentence or two? It's important because I don't think we can do our calculations for many things unless we have those insulin injections that are coming from the pump. Do you know what I'm saying? So can you just do one more iteration? It's not just like some nice to have thing. It's actually pretty pivotal, and we haven't asked for it yet, and we'll get the consent. But I also want to know in the feedback afterwards that you could give to Christiana whether you understand why we're getting it, and is that something that you'll likely consent to. So Jennifer, can you just
Yeah, no, it is really important because obviously as we're piecing together all these things, your CGM value and what you've eaten and all that, we need to know what is your pump doing? Or, conversely, if you don't use a pump, if you're using injections, how much have you injected and when, which is the My Doses feature in the app. So there, unfortunately, we are reliant on you to tell us what you're doing, or if you're recording that somewhere else to, kind of pull that data in like Emma was talking about. So it is really important that we know what you're doing with insulin. It's one of the reasons why this is so important to do with people with type 1 diabetes, because, when we're working with other populations, we don't really know what their pancreas is doing. Here, because you're giving yourself insulin or your pump is giving you insulin, and we can actually get a measure of that, we can quantify that and plug that into our models, and it'll be really important.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think we only have time for one last question, but I just want to thank everybody who is still submitting questions. All of your questions, we will, give as very thoughtful responses to, even the ones that we've already answered. And again, we will type those all out and make sure you all have access to those. So I think for our last question, let's go with, as far as the future of this study, if this pilot shows strong predictive potential, what would be the next step? Is it possible for us to envision a future where participants could access real-time beta cell performance insights through an app or an integrated dashboard?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jennifer and I are smiling. Yesterday, we were in Novato. We were not getting an OGTT. We were meeting with our coordinators, leads at ARPA-H, and we're 1 year into this multi-year study, and we ended with a description of how can we turn this into a product. And so I just really like that someone went to, okay, and so the short answer, and I would like Jennifer to add a little bit, is that this will give us is it feasible to do this? Every time you get more data from more people, your algorithms get better. So it will get us a chance to see. And I do think that it's not just, Jennifer, for the clinician to know it, but I really like the way the question came in is, at what point can I have a sense? And what I think we'll find, and we found in other studies, is your pancreatic function, although you would think it might be sort of static, may be slightly dynamic. And we may see that while there is in type 1 diabetes some residual pancreatic function, that you may see times when actually your certain things that you do with your lifestyle and other things may actually modify. This, I don't think anyone has thought about, but Jennifer, I toss it out to you. Do you know what I'm saying? We may not realize what it's like to be able to assess, and that is exactly why we're trying to build the app, is to have something where it's not something that once every other year you have a clinician do it. So Jennifer, did you?
Yeah, no, I love this question. This is exactly what I envision. That this is in participants' hands and you can get insights. Now, it may or may not be really real time. It might be, on some sort of more aggregate level that we can tell what's happening, that you'll be able to tell. But this is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do with this ARPA-H funding for this project, is to develop something that we can then, as Stephen said, turn into a product that we can put in your hands. That's what we're trying to do.
All right. So thanks to all who presented. Thank to all the teams that are behind them. Thank you all to the participants. Very excited to hear back from Christiana what came out of your attending. And also thanks to all the people who are going to be looking at this. We are likely to do one more Zoom call. So also any feedback on that was really a stupid hour or anything else that might help us design it is welcome. And good evening. Nice to have all of you on the same time zone. And this is something we look forward to. We're going to go through this Zoom call, and over many studies, we have found it helpful for participants to have a little deeper chance to know organizations, what we're doing, why, getting questions, and also realize that thank you all have been able to join this evening, but also recognize that some of you will be joining later. So whether it's now or later, great to have you on. And the question and answers that we're talking about are ones that we will post on the website for both the answers to the questions and additional questions. So feel as if this is something that's both live and possible to connect with afterwards. So what are we going to do today? I'll start out and tell you something about Buck Phenome Health for you and me, and why we're doing the study. I help lead the group at For You and Me, and I'm the PI on this study. After I do that, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer, who is going to give you a drill down on some of the science on why we're doing the modeling and what we're doing in the clinic. She'll pass it over then to Christiana, who will talk about progress on enrollment and the connections that I think each of you have made, certainly more deeply with her than any of us, on why we do the engagements. Then we'll go over to then the in-clinic efforts from Allison, who you have met if you've already had one of your OGTT at the Buck, over to Robin, over to Emma, and then we'll try to have enough time to get into some fun open discussions of all the studies that we've done. I think we have noted that the depth of knowledge about the disease, the depth of knowledge about why things are done and things like that is, I think, as peaked as we've ever had. So we're sort of excited about those questions at the end. So those three study partners For You and Me, Phenome Health and Buck, are luckily funded by ARPA-H. Why Phenome Health? Pretty straightforward. Phenome Health has been working on areas of how to identify aspects of disease, quantify health, increasing health span. The person who's driven it there at Phenome Health is Lee Hood. I've known Lee since we founded a startup back in the 90s, and I think it is worth your knowing how deeply he has driven the field of understanding disease through genomics. He was the developer of the first automated DNA sequencer. He figured out this term people now use, 4P, for